Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have the Empire of Dust versus Twilight Kin. This battle was fought at 2250 points and the scenario was Occupy. So as is common in 2019, my opponent begins his list with two formations. The first of which is Gemini, which involves two Hydrae. Gemini is an interesting formation because a Hydra has a special rule called, I believe, Many Heads, which gives it a bonus number of attacks equal to the amount of damage it suffered previously in the game, right? Or it has on it. It also has regen. So yeah, it gets that. It's a bit gimmicky, but Gemini dials that gimmick up to 11 and gives you an additional bonus equal to the amount of damage the other Hydra in the formation has suffered. So you gain bonus attacks equal to your damage and their damage. So it's interesting. I've run it previously in a Kin army where I brought Goblin allies to really get that Goblin Blaster to dial the gimmick up. But anyway, then we have the Night Dancers formation, which involves 2 regiments of Blade Dancers and 2 troops of Blade Dancers. I believe it gives them Stealthy and Mind Thirst. Then we have 2 hordes of Crossbowmen, 3 troops of Gargoyles, a horde of Fiends, 3 High Priestesses of the Abyss, 2 of whom have Bane Chant and 1 has Blood Boil and the Inspiring Talisman. So my thoughts on this list are that it's a good beginning, right? It's a good concept, and I just think it needs a bit of refinement. So I like I can see sort of what my opponent was going for, which is most of the combat blocks, in fact, all of the combat blocks have Mind Thirst. So that's pretty good. And then they went, well, that since I have Mind Thirst, why bring too much Inspiring? And I think that's where it falls apart. Because I think one of the strongest parts of the Kin having access to Night Stalkers now is that they can inspire those Night Stalkers. Normally, Night Stalkers can't have Inspiring in their list, but there's no rule that says they can't be inspired, just like there's no rule that says a dog can't play basketball. So yeah, I really like the idea of getting probably one of the High Priestesses out, swapping it for an ASB with either the Loot, if you want to keep the Bane Chant, or the Diadem of Dragonkind to keep the Fireball. I personally would prefer the Fireball, but I could see an argument for 2 sets of Bane Chant in this list. Yeah, I think that's probably where I would start. You save about 5 points, but I don't know exactly what I would do with that. I know I'm missing 20 points on the list already, so maybe you combine that together and get a Blessing of the Gods somewhere. But anyway, I think it's a good start for an army, and with some tweaks, it could be great. Here is my Empire of Dust list, which opens with the Mummy's Revenge, which involves a Cursed High Priest. I gave mine Heal 4, and then 2 regiments of Mummies. That formation grants both the Mummies Elite and Vicious. Then I have a Horde of Skeleton Archers, a Horde of Skeleton Warriors with Banner the Griffin, a Horde of Enslaved Guardians with the Orcish Skull Pole, 2 regiments of Revenant Chariots, a Pharaoh on Royal Chariot with Blade of Slashing and Blizzard 2, Mortibris, a Bone Giant, a Scorpion Husk, and the Soul Snare. So yeah, this is a slight adjustment to the list I played last, where I took out Apophis, I added in a Pharaoh, and I shuffled some items around to put a Scorpion Husk in. Those changes are more about I want this army to be ready by an event in May, and I might not be able to finish up any of my possible projects that I have available for Apophis by then to the degree I want to. So yeah, with that in mind, I thought it prudent to create some with like a Pharaoh and Royal Chariot, which I've always enjoyed in the past. I wanted to try out the Blizzard again. I've done it before. It didn't really work, but you gotta use it more than once, right? Don't just go with results-oriented thinking. But otherwise, the army is sort of, just what I have lying around. I do not think Scorpion Husks are worth it. 145 points, it competes so poorly with the other. It's sort of like the Reanimated Behemoth, where both those compete so poorly with Bone Giants and Bone Dragons that I have a hard time even looking at it. Even then, like, I could also bring the I think Revenant Champion on Worm, which is very similar to a Scorpion Husk, but can run. I mean, granted, doesn't have Vanguard, doesn't have Shamble, but there are advantages to both those losses. So yeah, I brought it because I have one. I want another monster. Here it is. So moving forward, here we see the setup, and let's talk about Occupy real quick. So the first thing you do in Occupy is you set out a secondary token in the direct center of the table. So secondary tokens, which are these green ones, there's one there, there's one here, and then there's one peeking out behind this house. Those are going to be worth 1 control point at the end of the game. But yeah, you place one in the dead center of the table. Then the player that chose table sides, in this case it was my opponent, places one objective within 6 inches of the center line and more than 12 inches away from another objective and 3 inches from any impassable terrain, including the board edge. So my opponent places theirs right here. So that is within 6 inches of the center. It looks like it might be close to the house, but that's just a perspective thing. So yep, they placed theirs there. And since one of the strengths of going second in this scenario is that you can create sort of a block to place all the objectives in, especially if you are a block army. And when you're fighting against, I mean, I'm fighting against this elf army, I don't think it can out attrition me. So anyway, I placed the secondary objective very close to the other 2 secondaries, so the skeletons can just rush in. My opponent then, in Occupy, you then place a primary objective, again starting with the person who chose table sides first, and you place that on your opponent's side of the table. So in this case, my opponent placed theirs on my side, which is over here, and they placed it right here because it has to be more than 6 inches from this, more than 9 inches from the center line, and then more than 6 inches from the board edge. So in this band sort of right here, right? So yep, it goes there. It follows all the other rules for objectives. And then I place one over here on top of this hill. So that one is more exactly at the, I think it's more exactly, no, it's exactly over 12. So, yep, that's the plan. I plan to just hold this side of the table and not really care about this too much, since if I can take care of those gargoyles, I don't think there's a whole lot my opponent can do about holding that objective without giving up too much. So that's the plan. Let's go over the terrain real quick. So in the bottom right, we have a height flat water piece. This is a tournament prep game, so things are a bit more normal than usual. Then we have a height 2 hill. Right here, we have a height 1 obstacle attached to a height 4 house. Then above that, we have another height 6 forest, or the first height 6 forest. Over here, we have a height 1 obstacle attached to a height 0 water feature. Below it, we have a height 6 forest, and then in the center, we have a height 2 hill. So yeah, this table is interesting. I think on first blush, it looks pretty good because it has these, these more limited line of sight vectors, right? So these funnels. But my opponent, I think, cleverly saw, or at least innately saw, that this side of the table is significantly better than this side. And it's not just the fact that there's nowhere to really hide over here, but also because there's a forest in the dead center. And if he had placed both the archer hordes in this wood, he could have placed, well, behind it, then advance forward on the turn one, on their turn one, to touch it, and then had 2 hordes of archers in the woods and able to see, probably a good 60% of the table. So yeah, that would have been very deadly, very difficult thing to counter there. But anyway, moving on to deployment, good segue into it. First off, with my opponent, we have the first troop of Blade Dancers. To the right of that is the horde of fiends. I love those models. Then we have the, well, this one's a tricky one. So we have the first Hydra here. Then we have the first troop of gargoyles here. Behind the gargoyles, we have the first regiment of Blade Dancers. Then to the left of those Blade Dancers, we have the this primed white sorceress. That is the one with Blood Boil and the Inspiring Talisman. Then we have a primed gray Marathi model. You can see her staff poking out there. That is one of the Banechant sorceresses. And then back over here to the right of the gargoyles, we have the beginning of the first horde of crossbowmen. Then next to the crossbowmen, we have the second troop of gargoyles. Behind them, we have the second regiment of Blade Dancers. And then over here, we have the second Hydra. To the right of it, we have the second horde of crossbowmen. Behind them, the third troop of gargoyles, and then bringing up this flank, the second troop of blade dancers. So yeah, this side of the table, no inspiring, and very little mind thirst. So maybe not the best. Speaking of that, let's talk about the Empire of Dust. So this would be on my right flank. We have the first regiment of chariots, then we have the horde of archers. Behind them, that is my cursed high priest with heal 4. Then we have the bone giant next to the horde of skeleton warriors. Poking out over here, this is my mortarbrist model for the day, so right there. And then we have the soul snare right here. Next to the soul snare, we have the horde of enslaved guardians. In front of them, the 2 regiments of mummies. Behind the second regiment of mummies, we have the pharaoh on chariot. And finally, we have the second regiment of revenant chariots. Actually, not finally. We've got one more thing to talk about, which is the scorpion husk that's already vanguarded forward before I took these pictures, hiding behind the house. Moving forward on to turn 1. So turn 1 goes to the Empire of Dust, and yeah, since my opponent, let's talk about their deployment real quick. They deployed in these 2 areas, right? So they've got a strong center and then a weak right flank, or as I see it, a right flank. So yeah, the right flank over here, this has no inspiring and only one set of mind thirst, only one set of reroll possible and it's on a troop. So, and then in terms of combat efficacy, if I can drop these blade dancers and then just not hurt the Hydra, drop it in one go, none of these units are really able to take me out. So I don't have to do a whole lot. While in the center, my opponent has done, I think, made a mistake, and in fact I believe they pointed this out on their turn 1, which is the gargoyles are in front of the blade dancers here. And that is not the best plan, because the gargoyles are more to tie things up or maybe go grab an objective in a mission like this. So yeah, putting them in front of the blade dancers, who because of their formation also have stealthy, that's just not a great plan. So anyway, in my movement, these leftmost chariots go the farthest forward. They're just out of 16 from the fiends, obviously, because you deploy under 12. So just out of charge range there. Then everything else moves as it can. I actually really like how this blocking turned out. I did not plan anything when I was putting stuff down. It just clicked, I guess. So yeah, everything just advances forward. The pharaoh falls into line with the mummies, helping them out. I thought about keeping the pharaoh over here, but I just don't see a point in it, as there's a wall right here. So these blade dancers are not going to be running anyway. I do take the the scorpion husk, which was facing like this with the red box and the arrow indicating direction, staring at the center, because I wanted to make it so if my opponent got first turn, I'm threatening them already with the scorpion, and the only thing that could make it into me with a charge or these gargoyles. Maybe these gargoyles too, but that one's a bit iffier. So I'm not really afraid of either of them. So if they go into me, whatever. And since they didn't, I went, well, I don't really need to be here anymore. So the scorpion just turns this way and walks off to do the exact same thing with this flank, since it's so weak already. So yeah, I really like those deployments. The only thing that didn't move was this horde of skeleton archers, and that is because I'm going to surge them into my giant, so they don't take the -1. Speaking of that, let's talk about the end of the turn, which is I cast I cast Surge with my Curse High Priest onto the Skeleton Archers. They go their max distance. Mortarbrist doesn't have anything to do because he's still pretty far back, so no lightning bolts just yet. So instead I go for a Bane Chant on the Skeleton Archers, which I do land. So yeah, the corn dog of victory right there. And the Skeleton Archers let loose onto this Hydra and do very well. They do 6 wounds on their own. So go Skeleton Archers. And then seeing a wounded bit of prey, these Revenant Chariots shoot into the Hydra as well, but they've only got 4 shots on 6s due to cover and movement. So yeah, don't sink anything. Now, these Revenant Chariots do end up sinking 1 wound onto this troop of gargoyles with their 8 shots on 6s, and needing a 7 to waver, they do get the waver. So that's pretty lucky, but to balance that out, of course, the the blizzard misses with 2 1s. You know, it just happens. But yeah, it's always a bit jarring to see that double 1 in a game of Kings of War. Yeah. So pretty good turn 1. I got a lot of wounds. I'm happy with my positioning, and I got a very lucky waver. So pretty cool. Let's move on to Kin turn 1. So Kin turn 1, you can see things don't really advance. The my left flank, or as I would see it, the left flank, advances forward. These Blade Dancers, again, cannot run over the wall, so they just move over it. The Fiends just advance as well because they want to pivot a little bit, as does the Hydra. You see one of the Sorceresses moves forward to get a fireball onto my chariots. That's pretty whatever. And then so my opponent could have pivoted with gargoyles because they can still fly, so they can pivot over unit and then move. They don't have to clear it. So could have pivoted there and moved 5 this way to let these Blade Dancers, ooh, that's a lot of arrows, let these Blade Dancers through. But in the end, they decide not to, and I don't know about that, but you know, it's not my game to play. So some people like to be a bit more pensive, but especially considering the lack of inspiring in that army, the amount of Mind Thirst and the amount of combat efficacy, I would probably want to get my my regiments of Blade Dancers as far forward as fast as possible when I was when playing against an army like Empire of Dust. But anyway, they don't. And on the right, speaking of that, my opponent does not pass the regen 3+ there, and the Hydra regens 1 wound back. But yeah, on my right flank here, my opponent originally decides to move forward with the archers, but moves into a place where, so if they get on the hill, my chariots over here can charge them. So they don't really want to be on the hill, and my opponent was and awing a lot about what to do there, and I just went, well, I'm height 3, you can already just shoot me, and if you move, you're -1, and if I have cover, you're -1, so it doesn't even matter. And so, you know, they go, oh, that's a good point, and then also don't move anything else, which I found very strange, especially, you know, with these harpies here, could have flown right in front of the chariots to allow the Blade Dancers to advance forward, and maybe the Hydra as well. So I'm not sure. I mean, these gargoyles can probably charge my Scorpion right now. I just don't get why this didn't move at all. But it was pretty late at night, so maybe that, in fact, I bet that has a lot to do with it. And yep, just showing off a combat angle. And let's apparently I didn't take an end of turn shot. To talk about this real quick, with my opponent shooting, I believe this fireball does 1 damage to these chariots. This horde of archers does like 1 damage to a mummy regiment, I want to say. And then the horde of archers here, even with cover, fire into my chariots and do 4 damage. So nothing dies, nothing crumbles, but still an okay amount of damage. And here is turn 2. So turn 2 is when things get a little bit more interesting. First off, you can see on my left, the chariots have a pretty easy charge into these Blade Dancers. And I do this partly because, well, I could kill them. Blade Dancers aren't that tough, and especially not a troop. So if I pop through them, I can overrun a bit if I want. I could spin if I wanted. There's a lot of stuff I can do. But on top of it, even if I don't kill them, these Fiends turning around to deal with me is exactly what I want. The chariots are just a chaff unit. I just want them to do as much damage and cause as much chaos as possible. So another turn where my opponent spends killing them, that's fine with me, especially if I get these Blade Dancers in the trade there. So yep, I go in. The Pharaoh just sort of stays put to make it so I have plenty of Blizzard targets, since Blizzard is a minimum range of 12. Then I excuse me, advance forward with my mummies. The ones on the left here turn a little bit to make sure that these units are in their front. The other ones just sort of stare directly forward, since these snake ladies are in the flank but can't actually charge it due to the other unit of mummies. Then the Soul Snare here, it doesn't quite look like it, but I've got just a small amount of line of sight onto these gargoyles. So that's the plan there. Just going for a quick soul drain, or drain soul there. Soul drain. And then I also make I make a choice here, which is these chariots could advance forward, but I really want to make sure I get rid of this Hydra this turn, and so I think I might need their bows. Also, I can heal. The witches are not within charge range. I out-threat them, so I'm not really worried about it just yet. So I just stay put. I cast heal on them. You can see that they're at 3. That's because I only healed 1. You know, wizards. But yeah, I do want to kill this Hydra this turn, or hopefully I can kill off this Hydra this turn, because the other Hydra is definitely getting too close to my combat blocks, and due to Gemini, I don't want them to get a +5 or a plus whatever to their amount of damage, or yeah, to their possible damage. So instead, I want to make sure I kill a Hydra completely before engaging the other one. So with that said, I take all of my skeleton bowmen, I shoot into the Hydra. I do fairly well with the number of hits and wounds, but then I also throw Mortibrus's lightning bolt there. I get them up to like, I get that Hydra to like 12 or 13 wounds. It's pretty good. With the rest of my shooting, the Drain Soul goes onto these gargoyles. I think I do 6 wounds. Yeah, I want to say I do 6 wounds to them with that Drain Soul, so it's pretty cool. And then I get my Blizzard. So I have a target, which is this sorceress who has revealed herself. So I shoot there, and I believe I hit with one of them and do 3 or 4 points of damage, so that's pretty good too. And then finally, I've got a weird little wind blast. If I got I think I needed a 3 hits on my wind blast 5 to knock these archers out of the wood and make them have to move again next turn. So I go for that. I think I end up pushing them 2 back though. And here is the results. So first off, I get my first double 1 of the game on these gargoyles. Granted, it's not the worst double 1 because it's on gargoyles. It's not in combat. It just shows off how good shooting really is, because whenever I used to play a lot of War Machine, and I'm sure you guys get this, but and the biggest difference between a melee assassination caster, which is someone that runs in and slices you to death with your sword and wins the game, because in War Machine you just need to kill their warcaster or their king, like in chess, to win the game. It's one of the ways out. And the difference between that a melee one and a ranged one is that a ranged caster doesn't put itself in that big of danger when it shoots at you, right? And that seems like a simple concept, but it's huge. So there's a reason why ranged units really need to be reined in, and I'm not saying that they're wrong in Kings of War, I mean in terms of game design as a whole, because it turns out if I can shoot at you and you're not within charge range and go for high rolls, it's just easier and better. So yep, I go in here, I get a double 1. It sucks. I still think it's a bad rule that this unit can activate, or that it's not wavered, but whatever. And speaking of that, let's talk about the rest of the units. So first off, I did 3 damage to this sorceress, and I wavered it. These guys are not wavered. I did not shoot at them. Must have just been a missed token. You can see I do end up killing off this Hydra, so that's big news. I was like, wow, maybe I didn't do 12 or 13, maybe I did 10 or 11, or got it up to 10 or 11, because I remember rolling pretty well on the break test, and then went, oh, I have to do that again, and then went, oh wait, no, there's no inspiring over there. So yeah, it's a little naughty. So yeah, I kill off this Hydra, I waver this sorceress, I do end up killing these blade dancers, which is great because I can also dodge the line of sight of the fiends. So yeah, I got a double 1 here, but the rest of the turn is turning out pretty. I got a double 1 here, and then I didn't quite knock this unit out of the woods, which is not, that was not a a high chance of victory. But still, I'll take 2 slight stumbles for 2 big moves, so I'm pretty happy about that. And we move forward on to turn 2 for the kin. So turn 2 for the kin, starting on the left, you can see these blade dancers made it into my chariots. I actually didn't see that if we roll a picture back. I didn't see this move on my turn because I just sort of assumed that these blade dancers wouldn't be in charge range, but 14 inches is deceptive at times. And that's what she said. But yeah, so they get the charge into my chariots. I'm not super happy about this one. Well, I said I'd be happy if the fiends charged me, because they'd be out of position. They already had possible charges, but these blade dancers have just been sitting there for 2 turns. So because they got this charge, it invalidates one of those turns that my opponent, I believe, made a mistake and just sat still, or the first turn where they sat still, as opposed to just moving through the gargoyles or moving the gargoyles, doing something. So yeah, I'm not too happy about that. But the rest of it, we've got fiends and a hydra into the front of mummies. That's going to be an interesting one because, I mean, fiends have 24 attacks, but they're on 4s, so it's always sort of a, you know, it's a spike unit, right? It has a very high ceiling, very low floor. But those mummies are a -19 right now due to the Banner of the Griffin's proximity. So secondly, the double wand, are these the double? I think these are the double wand gargoyles charge into my... No, this was the unit that was wavered before. I don't know why they're taking the waver token with them. But yeah, so they charge into the other mummies just to hold them up. The double wand gargoyles just advance into the wall to threaten, I believe, my archers right now. And otherwise, on the right flank, my opponent moves forward, finally getting onto the hill with these archers and moving with the blade dancers and gargoyles to contest these chariots. I think this is an okay move, but there's probably even a bit of game on a flank charge. It looks like I might be able to get a flank charge onto these onto these crossbowmen with my chariots. So I think the gargoyles should be a lot more forward, just to trap me in place anyway. But yep, that's about it. You can see the characters are sort of shuffling around. There's one sorceress shuffling out to maybe get a fireball on my chariots. The wavered sorceress just moves back. The inspiring sorceress moves forward to get a Bane chant or a blood boil maybe in the future. But with shooting, you can see my opponent has taken the horde of archers and moved them anyway, so I guess the wind blast was fine, because they want to shoot into this scorpion husk for some reason. So yep, both the archer hordes fire into the scorpion husk, end up doing 5 damage to it, which is a 9 to kill and doesn't land it. Moving forward into the turns, yeah, turns out a regiment of blade dancers will blender an unsupported regiment of revenant chariots, so they get rid of them. My mummies thankfully hold against the fiends and the hydra. They do end up taking 8 wounds, which is a lot, but you know, we hold it still an 11 to kill them. Mummies are great. The friggin' gargoyles do 3 wounds to these mummies, so that's pretty funny. But yeah, that's not even a roll, so they're fine. The 5 wounds. My opponent at this point decides to do, so they shoot this horde of crossbowmen into my scorpion husk, doing 5 wounds, then rolls the break test and goes, oh, it didn't work, and then tries to shoot me with the other horde of skeleton or crossbowmen. And I went, well, you already rolled the break test. You roll break test for shooting at the end of the phase, and 2, you can't just like roll the break and then shoot at something, right? That would be terrible. That'd be super broken. And my opponent's like, oh no, I've been teaching it wrong, because apparently earlier that day he'd been teaching some new people how to play Kings of War, and had messed that step up. So yeah, we just pull it back, and I let him shoot me anyway, and re-roll it, and there's no break. So the scorpion husk stays just barely after taking 7 wounds total instead of the 5. But yeah, that is the end of the turn. No units are gone except for 1 regiment of revenant chariots, so things are looking pretty good for Empire of Dust. Turn 3 again. So turn 3, you can see the Empire of Dust is now getting back into, or getting more into the game. I could have taken my Pharaoh on Chariot into the combat with maybe the Fiends or the Hydra, and in the end I went, meh. In fact, specifically the Hydra, I think, was my original plan. So charge these 2 in first, then do a nimble charge into the Hydra, then do this counter charge. So I slide a bit over here, but I just don't care that much. So I pull it back, go for a blizzard onto these guys, or these gals, these ladies, these women. So yeah, going for that, I move my Soul Snare forward to get a cheeky little, there's a just barely a line past the Hydra to target that Sorceress with it, hoping to drain, both kill her off, because she's already on 3 wounds, but also heal these mummies up a bit. The mummies, the gargoyle wounds stick, but the snake wounds do not. I regen 3 off there. Then yeah, so the double 1 gargoyles just moved right into my giant's charge, and bone giants have Strider like all the other giants. So yeah, I just take that charge real quick. My scorpion husk just moves to take shelter behind the bone giant. I take my Revenant chariots. It looks like in the end I decided that that was a front charge. Kind of looked like a flank in the side. I wonder if I even measured that. But anyway, I take the charge into the archers. Seems prudent. This guy, this little priest, can't really move too far, but I am basically I'm just out of 14 of the blade dancers and out of line of sight of the gargoyles, so nothing can get me except for this sorceress. Yeah, just sitting ass in the wind a bit. My archers sort of pivot a little bit to shoot at the gargoyles in the future, and everything else just advances. With my shooting, the Soul Snare does a fair amount of damage to the sorceress, and I believe gets another waver, while my Blizzard again misses. You know, that's Blizzard. So here is double 1 number 2 of the game. So the archers end up doing 6 wounds to these gargoyles, and then I roll double 1s on that too. So yep, gargoyles are just double 1 bait. You heard it here first, probably not. But anyway, then here's, that's a bit of a lead-in. So yeah, here's the next combat, which is the mummies and my enslaved guardians put 22 points of damage on the snakes and double 1 this. So that is double 1's number 3 of the game and number 2 of the turn. So that one's real bad, and really puts into context that like you should be wavered, because these worms are very dangerous, and the fact that they can, it's not that they're alive, right, which is already a gift. It's not that I have to devote more resources to kill them, right, which is also a gift. It's that they also will probably end up deleting one of these units because of it. So it's unfortunate. And moving forward, here is the end of turn shot. You can see the snakes are up because of that double 1, but I don't double 1 these gargoyles, so at least one of the units of gargoyles are not immune to it. The other gargoyles are not immune to a second helping of double 1s. So yeah, I get them with the giant and turn to face the center. This double 1 here is pretty bad for the game, or pretty bad for the Empire of Dust, but it does make the game a lot more interesting, because if I had blown through these fiends, I'm not sure my opponent can actually recover. With all my healing between Drain Life and literally heal, I believe Mortibrus casts heal this turn, and Life Leech, the mummies are at full health. Now, these mummies are only on 1 damage, and the only thing that's really damaged is the Scorpion Husk, because, you know, fuck the Scorpion Husk. But anyway, that is the end of turn, and we move on to turn 3 for the kin. So turn 3 kin, first off, we've got the Blade Dancers going into the mummies. Actually, that's the second charge, because first, the fiends get a counter charge onto my enslaved guardians, along with an actual charge from the Hydra in the front. Then the Blade Dancers charge my mummies to hopefully take them out. The other Blade Dancer, the Blade Dancer regiment, goes into my second mummy regiment, hoping to kill them in one go, which is possible given that my opponent has a Bane Chant over there. You can see that I managed the waiver there. That lady is sitting on 7 wounds, and I did roll a 3 there, but no picture because that's not a double 1. So yeah, I get a waiver. And these archers just sort of move forward. I guess they're trying to block off my Bone Giant a little bit, which is fair. But the other archers, you can see, yeah, my chariots actually charged into those archers, and you can see a die back there. And that's because they hit with 1 attack, and thankfully it wounded. Otherwise, they would have just shot me anyway. So they go for the counter charge going in. The troop of Blade Dancers just turn, so they've got a flank on the chariots, or they can go for the Scorpion. They can go for a lot of things right now. Just being getting a good set of positions here. I probably would have moved in a little bit, but anyway, not me. And the double 1 friggin' gargoyles get a charge into my skeleton archers due to it, and regen quite a few, or maybe that die just fell. But they either regen 6 wounds or the die has tipped over. But I think they actually regen a lot that turn. So seems plausible. And moving forward into, yep, just a quick action shot and then end of combat. So the Enslaved Guardians cannot hold against these two units, and almost all of that is because of the snakes. They hit and wound with quite a few attacks. I'm not exactly sure. I know that the Hydra has only 5 attacks, so Hydra goes in with 5 attacks. Actually does pretty well, but there's no way a Hydra is going to take out an Enslaved Guardian horde. But with the Snake's help, they manage it. Thankfully, the Blade Dancers don't take out this regiment of mummies, as they are not within 6. I don't even think they're inspired right now. If I'm going to roll a couple pictures. Oh no, they're definitely inspired, but they do not have rally, so they are only a -18. So my opponent doesn't roll a 7 at least once, and they remain on the table. While you can see the other mummies also take 11 wounds from the other Blade Dancers. They're a -19, and they also stay on the table. The Hydra has decided to advance forward, while the Snakes have just stayed put. They don't really have a choice, as there's a sorceress behind them. They can't pivot, and they can't really go forward because these mummies are alive. So, yep, only the Hydra runs up, getting ready to kill off my Soul Snare, and that is... oh, yeah, the archer is shot into this Bone Giant, I want to say, and doing 1 wound to it, while this sorceress tries to fireball my Scorpion, doing a further 1 wound to it, and being a -14, it stays on the table somehow. So that's pretty cool. The archers here do significantly better than I did, doing 4 damage in combat versus my chariots, but you know, it's what happens. And then the gargoyles do 4 damage to my skeleton archers, even though they are hindered due to the water. But that just shows you, like, I was seeing some stuff on Fanatics, or maybe just on Facebook in general, about skeleton archers in the undead group, not in the Empire Dust group. And I think people really underestimate how bad a stat defense 3 is, right? So people are like, oh, I mean, they're a -23 horde, or I think they're a -16 regiment, or a -12-ish troop, which is really good. They're fearless, they've got some shots, but they're only a 6+ to hit in melee, and then that defense 3 is a big thing in terms of how tough they are, because most people like to talk about, they're fearless and then they have very high nerf, but they don't have the defense of, say, skeleton warriors, right? And so when you go, well, everything has crushing too. No, everything does have crushing too, right? Gargoyles definitely do not have crushing too, and they're gonna do bubkiss to a skeleton horde, but to a skeleton archer horde, yeah, they might do some real damage. So anyway, I digress. That's just sort of talking about probabilities, or anyway, let's move on to turn 4. Turn 4, the Empire of Dust decides to go in. I don't think I either didn't roll regen yet, or I rolled terribly, because they still have 11 wounds on them. I do countercharge into the Blade Dancers, though. Because the Hydra overran a little too far, my Pharaoh has a flank charge on it, so that's really good. I don't think this is the final positioning of the Soul Snare. I think it ends up over here somewhere, because the Soul Snare is just hoping to do a wound to the snakes to kill them off. These mummies have regened, so they regen down to 7 wounds, and they had a nice little corkscrew, or not a full corkscrew, but a pivot charge into the flank of these archers, so they could see the archers just barely, and then on top of it, they can just pivot past the Blade Dancers and get this easy flank. The Bone Giant decides to go into the front of the archers as well, just because why not? Brutal never hurt anybody. And so I send my Scorpion Husk into the Sorceress, and I'm like, well, it's got 8 attacks on a 4+, and that's sort of the problem with it, is that it hits on a 4+, right? Like, I get most, undead hit on a 4+, that's just sort of their shtick. But if you're gonna cost 145 points and be competing with, say, a Bone Giant or with a Bone Dragon, you can't be on a 4, man. Anyway. The chariots take the countercharge into these archers, hoping to hold them for another turn. In fact, they will, no matter what, hold them for another turn. And then my skeleton archers go in to take the countercharge into these gargoyles, hoping to kill them off in one go. That'd be real good. Yeah, Morgana moves a little bit. I think he maybe had some plans to, you know, cast a lightning bolt onto a stealthy unit or something. Who knows? And here is the... this is not quite the end turn, because you can see I actually forgot to roll this combat the first time around, but oh yes, this is the revised shot because the Soul Snare moved forward. So yeah, the Soul Snare moved forward and is now staring into the snakes. So we're going to cast there, and here is double ones again. So I charge into these ladies. I only do 6 damage. So this one is a joke double ones, but I did roll another set of them. So pretty funny there. I do end up healed a lot here. So if we roll a picture back, you can see I ended up regenning 5 wounds when I rolled it for that unit. And after their healing and life leech, I am at 0 wounds. So still okay. And with this combat, so I end up killing off the horde of crossbowmen, which you might have guessed, with elite vicious mummies in the flank. I end up getting my mummies down to 2 wounds now, so they're only +1 wound from the previous round. Pretty good. Staring down the blade dancers, who still have, you know, an avenue to charge through here into my soul snare, but still want to keep them in the front. And here is the end of the round. So yeah, double one to this unit, but whatever. My Pharaoh ends up killing off the Hydra. That's really good. And advancing forward, we put this out because we wanted to see the line of sight. And the Blade Dancers cannot see my Pharaoh. And originally I was like, ooh, this Pharaoh is sort of trapped between 2 different regiments of Blade Dancers that can see either they both see my flank, or one sees my rear and one sees my front. So I was like, that is just, no matter, you know, which of those get me, it's real bad. So I decided to go forward with the Pharaoh, and he just threads this needle of dodging their line of sight, dodging their line of sight, and I'm like, wow, there was just this perfect spot that the Pharaoh could land in. So that was pretty cool. You can see the Scorpion Husk does 4 wounds, so about average, a little above to the Sorceress, but doesn't even waver her because, you know, that's his lot in life. And lastly, we have the Chariots doing a further 1 wound to the crossbowmen, you know, getting them disrupted again. And the Skeleton Archers doing at least 1 wound to the... I think they actually just did the 1 wound to the Gargoyles, but roll high enough to just kill them off. I mean, Gargoyles are only an 8/10, so I needed a 7. Got it. Killed them. And here we see turn 4 for the kin. The Blade Dancers, so the double one Blade Dancers, I mean, they also have Headstrong. Like, it's so whatever. But yeah, they go into my regiment of mummies. These Blade Dancers go into my Soul Snare, and originally my opponent wanted to go into the mummies, right? And I went, well, you could do that, or you can go into this Soul Snare and then maybe overrun if you wanted to. And I'm like, well, but then that'll get you a rear charge. And he goes, I don't really care. Just goes into the Soul Snare, kills it off. No one likes the Soul Snare this year. So, you know, you do what you do. The Sorceress is, I think this picture was taken before, as I'm like, well, you could countercharge. And my opponent was like, oh, I'm going to cast Fireball. I'm like, well, you can't cast Fireball. So I think she runs off in the end. But yep, so that picture is not quite right. Then we have a countercharge from the crossbowmen and a flank charge from the Blade Dancers. So those chariots are poofed unless my opponent can get on my level with double ones. So we'll see about that. And yeah, let's move forward onto the action shot. So just showing off sort of how it looks from the Pharaoh's point of view. And here is the end of the turn. So my opponent kills... Oh, this is why. Yeah, they kill off the Soul Snare. And I'm like, well, if you fall back, right, you can... If you roll 1, both the mummies and the Pharaoh are going to get flank charges. But if you roll 3, it puts them both in your front, right? So my opponent rolls it and gets a 3. So yeah, both these units are now in the front of those Blade Dancers, thus optimizing the chances for survival. And we move on to turn 5. Well... Yeah, let's show up. Apparently I didn't want to show off the fact that these chariots died. But yeah, these chariots died. These mummies only took 3 wounds this time, so those Blade Dancers really shit the bed that time. Not able to reprise their role. So yes, with my charges, I take these mummies into Blade Dancers, hoping to finish them off. They're already sitting on 6 wounds, so Morgana goes over here just to make sure that the Blade Dancers are inspired. No, just making sure that these mummies are, in case I fail. I take my Pharaoh and some skeleton warriors into the Blade Dancers because I really want to make sure I have this token. So I have a flank charge with this giant that I saw. I take that and I go, well, I'm not going to make it back to the token. The only thing over there is this scorpion husk, which is, you know, a hair's breadth away from death. So I take the mummies, move over there, and just go, it should be enough with a giant on the side, a pharaoh on the front, and some skeletons, right? Just take that. I don't think I adjust the archers at all because they plan to just shoot into these Blade Dancers real quick. I positioned the Scorpion Husk. I couldn't see the flank. Originally, my opponent had positioned this unit so I could just charge him in the front. And I'm like, well, you know, you can either position yourself so I charge you in the front without casting Surge, or you can make it so I have to cast Surge, but I get a flank. So my opponent goes for the flank move. And you can see I'm positioned at that. My wizard is set up to cast. Hopefully I can kill off these Blade Dancers with my archers, because otherwise bye-bye birdie there. And that's about it. So yeah, here it is. I do 4 wounds to the Blade Dancers and I get a boxcar. So, you know, the game giveth and the game taketh away, or in this case, the inverse. So yeah, I kill off these Blade Dancers in one go from Skeleton Archers. That makes 3 units, I want to say, that they've creamed this game. Pretty cool. And here is the other flank where my mummies have taken out the Blade Dancers. That 6 is just because my opponent doesn't move the die until they're alive, I guess. Sort of that pessimistic view of they're dead until proven otherwise. So yeah, the mummies kill off the Blade Dancers, while the Skeleton Warriors, Pharaoh and Giant, kill off the other Blade Dancers, and just staring down this the pile of sorceresses now. And here's what the end of the turn looks like. So everything works except for one thing, which is the Scorpion Husk, which goes into the flank of the Archers, has 16 attacks, and sinks 2 wounds. So good job, buddy. With Vicious, too. Yeah, wow. Wow. Results-oriented thinking, guys. Just give in. Scorpion Husk sucks. But yeah, so it goes in there, and we move on to turn 5 for the Twilight Kin. You can see a countercharge from the Horde of Archers into the Scorpion Husk, sitting on 6 wounds. Yeah, 6 wounds right now due to Life Leech. So should still be able to kill it in one go. The sorceresses just sort of position themselves to double cast Fireball onto the injured mummies, going for maximum carnage. And that's about it. Let's see how it turns out. Yeah, so this is the end of shooting. My opponent ends up doing 4 wounds to the mummies, but can't roll that 11 twice to kill them. And then the other sorceress shot into my cursed High Priest, because that was my only inspire for these mummies, doing 3 wounds, but can't roll the 10 twice to kill them. So yeah, unfortunate for my opponent. And oop, I'm not sure what happened in this combat. Was it literally nothing to the Scorpion Husk? So, whatever happened. Turn 6, though. Turn 6, yep, they did no wounds to the Scorpion Husk. So I advance forward with the Archers to claim the secondary objective. The Scorpion Husk charges into the Archers again, hoping to, you know, do a little better this time. The mummies are positioned in a way where the first thing they'll touch is the corner of the unit, not the Scorpion. So if I surge, if I get a decent surge here, I will hit the corner, and then I will move into the front here. I move my Pharaoh forward to, there's a secondary, it's right about here, I want to say, moving there to grab that token while I'm at it. I take a Bone Giant into the Wounded Sorceress. I take some mummies into the other Sorceress. I sit on the center objective. So I'm just covering all my bases. The only thing I'm not covering is the primary for my opponent, which is over here somewhere, and that does not score me points, so whatever. And here is the end of shooting, which is, excuse me, my mummies do make it, but I do have to cast Surge twice, unfortunately, because Mortibrus he's like, I've got Surge 10. I needed like a 4, I want to say 4 or 5 to make it in there, and he rolls like 2. So, you know, doing the Lord's work there, bud. with my shooting, I end up wavering this sorceress with skeleton archers. I really wanted to get that fourth kill. Whatever is better than a hat trick happening. But I do end up with the Scorpion Husk and the mummies killing off the horde of crossbowmen, while my giant kills off, actually no, my giant and then the mummies over here just waver these two sorceresses. So all three sorceresses are left on the table for my opponent's turn 6. All three sorceresses are wavered. So that was pretty funny. We just don't even, there might be a, yeah, here's an end of game shot. My opponent decides to concede by pulling all the models off the... Oh, no, they don't concede. They just run away with the sorceresses. See? Yeah. So, yeah, all the sorceresses just run off. But it is the end of 6. We roll it. There is no turn 7, although I'm not sure what my opponent could do even were there a turn 7. So I have my primary objective with the Scorpion Husk and the mummies over there. I have a secondary with the Skeleton Archers. I have a secondary with my Pharaoh, and I have a secondary with my Skeleton Warriors. So that is a 5-0 victory. Pretty crushing victory for the Empire of Dust. As for my thoughts on the game, I think that a lot of the misplays come down to it was 2 in the morning and all of us were up way past our bedtime. So yeah, otherwise I think my opponent has a good start for an army, and I'm liking how the Empire of Dust are playing out so far. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below, and until next time, bye!